covers historic and cultural resources, and they are deliberately revisiting to the point the commissioner just made of how to address cultural resources, archaeological resource. And so this process is probably going to take 6 to 8 months to ferry out the concepts and how local governments can coordinate with tribal governments in ways that maybe aren't necessarily kind of truly codified in policy. But from the community development department standpoint, we are monitoring this process. Again, it's just been really initiated, but Tanya and the planning division will, as well as the county planning directors throughout the state, will be involved. And as they hit certain benchmarks and there's proposed rules that are going to go to the Land Conservation and Development Commission, we can let, of course, the county commissioners know, but this Landmarks Commission body as well. And to the extent that you have observations or recommendations, you can communicate that to the Board of County Commissioners, who is really the policy arm for Deschutes County. So we can synchronize that in a way as that process continues to get refined, so that you're at least familiar with what the concepts are. And if you have some thoughts or perspectives, the team can coordinate through the Board of County Commissioners, because it's significant. It's something that at the state land use level, with the state land use program, it's something that didn't get addressed in the inception of Goal 5 in the 90s when they were doing rulemaking. So it's important, and it's certainly been brought to everyone's attention, the importance of reaching out to our tribal partners. So it's an exciting opportunity with more to come.
So have in the past, has any of the local tribes engaged with this committee? Have there ever been any involvement at all with Native Americans living in the area?
It's certainly with the historic land, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs has been involved most recently in land use, as it pertains to kind of resort development. That engagement was a new experience for the community development department. The tribes are extensively involved in water management, and you may have heard of the Deschutes Basin Collaborative process, or the Deschutes Basin Study, which is a reexamination of water allocation. And Commissioner Chang, you can speak more to this than I can, but they've been intimately involved in water resource, water allocation, how it protects their influence as it pertains to the Deschutes River. For historic resources, we have done historic. I mean, I've been involved, like Nick, for over a decade, and I can't think of a direct engagement with them. And admittedly, that could be a blind spot that we had that will be fully daylighted as part of this Goal 5 rulemaking. So it's a great question, but I couldn't tell you specifically how we've engaged them in the past, beyond just kind of general historic preservation awareness during May Preservation Month.
And are you aware of who those contacts in the tribes would potentially be? Usually they have designated folks that deal with the cultural assets. Do we know that? Who?
We have contacts with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. I can't give you a name, but because of their recent involvement and with community development department issues, it would be very easy for us to reach out to them, and we should make an overture to them and acknowledge that with this new Landmarks Commission, anytime that we're interested in their perspective, but now more than ever, the questions are being asked, and kind of extend that invitation.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to have them join us.
I do think it might be. Oops, excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do think it might be good though to wait until the state recommendations come out. My experience has been is that almost anybody with a land use issue or development going on in Eastern Oregon may have the potential to have to consult the tribes. It's very easy to overwhelm kind of a limited resource there. And so if the state is going to put forth kind of organizing principles and maybe in their dialogue with the tribes, better identify those people in process, we're probably going to do better aligning with that first. So it might be good to wait before we decide on process, though I don't think outreach at any time is bad to that point.
And I know when you were on outreach, I actually drove up a couple of years ago when the blue plan was being done, Eastern Oregon's Mountain Fair Plan. And took a package invitation to Bobby Bruno, and he actually became part of that group. But it's so important to, meet them in person. So
I agree.
yeah,
Since we're neighbors, let's be friends.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting driving around. You didn't go here, and you had to go up here, and it's important.
Well,
Yeah,
I do have a curiosity
So
too.
they're not being involved with any of the agendas, or they don't know we exist, right?
I mean, to the same degree that to the same degree that anybody does. There's not a specific notice
Okay.
that we send out, but yeah, they're on our list for regular land use notice now. They're, one nuance to it is that, with resources, we can't nominate a resource. It has to come from the owner of a property for something new that needs to be nominated. So we can't compel somebody to designate their whatever it is as a resource. It has to come from them. So that's another little wrinkle. But I think Mark's recommendation to kind of hold back a little bit until we know kind of the state's strategy is a good one. But Nick, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do recall, and Peter will remember when I say it, we did have a certified local government grant where you and I went out to the archaeological survey on a property 10 to 12 years ago. And of course, we then worked with SHPO. And I don't recall if SHPO designated the property and SHPO included the property on their resources, but that's been my only experience working with a potential archaeological site. So there was that one experience, but there's certainly a lot more that we can, should, and need to do.
And on the local Goal 5, we don't have any tribal land indicated, at least not in Deschutes County, right? Or
That's correct, Chair Stemich. The Goal 5 inventories that are recognized, we now list local and sites that are on the National Register of Historic Places. There are some notable, I would say, European, like the Santiam Wagon Trail, I think clips near in kind of Greater Sisters Country. So most of the public lands, natural resources, again, have kind of more of a European settlement legacy. On non-federal lands, it's back to kind of settlement, longstanding structures, things of that sort, cemeteries. So we don't have a lot of resources, but some of that may be deliberate, which was noted by one of our commissioners, that archaeological resources, as all of you are, I'm sure, well aware, are subject to far more confidential arrangements to prevent, destruction or looting. So no local government, to my knowledge, in Oregon or really throughout the country is transparently and making available for the public where sensitive archaeological sites are, because they're just so fragile and vulnerable. So that may be part of the reason why we don't have those inventories. Again, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be and can't reach, maintain those relationships or enhance those relationships in association with the state's update of Goal 5, as previously described.
There's one thing I'd like to suggest The HLC, I know it historically has done field trips. It might be beneficial for us to go up to the Warm Springs Museum or down towards the climate facilities down there to do a field trip, kind of bring our ability to gain knowledge, to them rather than kind of asking for them to come there. So I would put forth that as something for us to potentially look at here in the middle term, I'd say.
And Rachel, would it be inappropriate for us to send our agendas? There's always really interesting information that goes along with them, just as a friendly, hey, we haven't met in 8 years, but we're back. And so is that out of line?
Haven't met jointly with the Board of Commissioners in 8 years.
Oh, I misunderstood that. Okay, great.
Yes,
Oh,
It
that's
has
so
been a
much
little
better.
while since It has been a little while since the.
it hasn't been that long. No. Really
Okay,
just
great.
been out of the loop.
That's great. Thank you. I feel better now.
I have a comment about, I agree with Peter that the archaeological and cultural assets are really difficult to define publicly, but I can tell you that the Warm Springs Reservation and various tribal entities there have expressed very strong interest in working on projects with the Historic Museum in Bend and also with Three Sisters Historic Society. In fact, they worked in Sisters, they worked directly with us on the creation of a mural on one of the buildings in town where the culture, a very tiny segment of the cultural heritage is represented there. So they do have a very strong interest, and I think they'd be open to discussion. How we declare and define those things as goal 5, where that fits in the goal 5 scenario, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the state comes up with.
I would just offer the other opportunity is to coordinate with Dana Whitelaw with High Desert Museum. And they're just doing such extraordinary work, and given the changes in federal law, and they've been recognized recently for their great work of how they're displaying, returning, handling the artifacts and what they have in their possession. I'm speaking way beyond my knowledge. It's such an important issue. That could be something that
We'll be having the entire Bounds collection, which is from her sister Doris, was I know her family. So it is really amazing that that's where the collection was put. And then they have my family's sawmill it was made in 1932 or so from Eastern Oregon. And it's a steam sawmill that still works. So I just actually met someone who used to go there to get parts for their steam sawmill, like in Sweet Home or something, because it was the only one they could find parts to go back and forth. But no, the Bounds collection is phenomenal. Doris was nationally recognized. Her daughter, well, actually, it's her granddaughter, Larissa, that I know better.
This does kind of get to a question I had about the HLC. So we've talked about designated landmarks, and those are roads, settlements, buildings, things like that. We've also talked about archaeological sites, where there's obsidian shards and stuff. But I mean, they're part of the indigenous history of this area is the land management, and a spot that immediately comes to mind is Glazed Meadow up by Blackbee Ranch, and so that is an area that was historically very actively burned, proscribed burned by by indigenous people for I don't know how many hundreds of years, to promote certain kinds of cultural foods, and but there's no there won't be. There's not any artifacts there. There's not a settlement there. There's not a building there. But that history is certainly there. And so I guess, one of my questions is, how much is it the HLC's kind of mission to kind of preserve her history broadly or bring history to life for our community, and how much is the HLC's job about designating landmarks and kind of reviewing proposals to do stuff in those places. And, I mean, I know that part is a core responsibility, but then kind of what do you want to, how much do you want to do beyond that? So I think that's a question I would pose to the commission. Maybe it would be good to pose that to the commission like 6 months from now, rather than right now. But something to think about, because when the Board of County Commissioners was going through the process of evaluating whether the Historic Landmarks Commission essentially should be mothballed for a while, that was one of the things that many people brought up was, there is a bigger role to be played in our community, getting people excited about history, educating people about history, beyond just the core responsibility of designation and preservation of landmarks.
We have treated some of those issues before. The Klein Falls power plant, for example, that has disappeared, but there's an homage to what it was on site now, in the form of signage and a perspective for visitors to reflect on. And that certainly can be a function of the Historic Landmarks Commission. I believe it's a way to identify cultural heritage that doesn't interfere with it. Identifies a place, a location, a history, without the need for a building or whatever.
Thank you.
It's sort of like a living museum in the landscape.
Uh-huh.
And there are numerous sites listed on the Goal 5 that are just sites. So there's nothing limiting that from happening, as long as we take the appropriate steps. But that's been one of the tasks that we've talked about during past commissions as well, is reinvigorating that list and seeing what other eligible sites there are. That's one of the reasons why we do the historic assessment surveys occasionally, like ones that have been completed in Sisters, is so that we can identify potential sites like that. So I think that is definitely, like using that example as from Black Butte area as an example, is like, yeah, maybe we probably should look as a commission, look into what is viable, and then reaching out to the ownerships of those properties, I think, and just, as part of that outreach, I guess, again, is whoever is in ownership of it's like, are they even aware of the historic integrity of that site? Just even if it's just land. So
if we were to if we were to update or move ahead with maybe a revised inventory of potential and new opportunities for historic designation, or even just places to watch for in the next 5 or 10 years, what would that process look like in terms of all of our involvement, and how long would that kind of process take? And I guess thirdly, is it time to undertake something of that scale?
It's another great question, Commissioner. In the past, in terms of resources, a few years ago through the Certified Local Government Grant, the CLG grant, we applied and administered a reconnaissance level survey. At that time, we were looking at like historic recreational amenities on uh, public lands. It was pretty novel. We were thinking about our lodges and our ski areas. And so it starts with Commissioner Stemmer, Chair Stemich is more familiar with this than I am, but my experience is, the Landmarks Commission would want to prioritize a certain topic. So we can maximize the certified local government grant. And then we would coordinate with the State Historic Preservation Office and Curry Gill, who's an extraordinary resource, as is the agency. And we could apply for a reconnaissance level survey or ask for funding for a reconnaissance level survey. You go through a request for proposal, and then you're off they go, and they're going to fulfill that kind of research and coordination with representatives like Chris Hording Jones, who actually works at the federal level on, I think, even archaeological issues. So you're asking a good question. In the past, we have in the community development department has relied on the certified local government grant to provide the resources for this commission. And admittedly, it's not a lot of funding, but it's can be anywhere between kind of $10,000 to $15,000, 50% in-kind match, just for in-kind resources on a 1-to-1 ratio. And that's been maximized to do these kinds of surveys. And with the most recent one, as noted by Commissioner Stemich, there's been some reconnaissance level surveys in Sisters to look at their built environment and their housing in a way that recognizes that there's still these homes that have architectural integrity, that if we're not careful, they could get, demolished or remodeled in a way where they lose it. And that's something that Emmy can certainly talk about if this conversation wants to go there. So it's about prioritization and identifying the theme and finding resources that can help provide that level of analysis. Reconnaissance level surveys, if they're successful, lead into intensive level surveys. And then I think at that point, you're closer to having the documentation to put it on an official inventory, local or national, to the extent there was interest. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. Could that also include some of our native heritage research? Could it be more encompassing than just, as Commissioner Chang said, just buildings? And can it go farther?
I think it's. Do you know, Commissioner Simmons? I can't imagine why it wouldn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
propose an RFQ of sorts. I think we are at liberty to phrase it for the scope or define the scope however we want, so that you can get the interested consultants for the reconnaissance surveys. But I mean, you have to start somewhere, obviously. So it seems like that is the logical place. I don't think, if you go through those appropriate steps like that, I think you could get more momentum, I guess, with having that survey either in production, or when you do get to the point where the consultant knows exactly what they're researching and how to pull it all together. But I think we need to understand what are we asking them for, and to what extent. And that's what I remember from some of the previous surveys that we've done, is giving enough definition of what they're supposed to be researching before we can really even know what to do with it.
Well, and that kind of adds to the question I've had on my mind. I mean, ultimately, all the advisory committees to the board deal with kind of the community sense of place. The Planning Council deals with new development and does that meet with community sense of place. Even the bike ped, right, has to do with quality of life and sense of pace. The question I would want to explore before we actually got to the point of hiring somebody to do one of those surveys, which is, as I understand it, largely a literature and on-ground review, is make sure that we have a full and adequate sense of the community's desire to develop and explore and celebrate that sense of place, particularly associated with, if we're going to look at the question of indigenous history, that part of the community, and really get the tribes involved, because I've dealt with those reconnaissance surveys, and as I remember them, most of them are more of an academic performance than they are necessarily like a community survey performance. And I would definitely want to make sure that was done first.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, that's my understanding of them too. The surveys themselves are pretty cut and dry. Yeah, I'm not even sure, admittedly, I'm not even sure like what sites we even have within the county, meaning within the Tri-County area. I know there definitely are, but it's like within Deschutes County exactly, it's like I don't even know.
When you would, right, you would want to, if I may, obviously, if it's on federal land, there's federal process for that. And then when you're talking about non-federal, you're going back to the outreach, the community engagement. You would want to make sure you have the willingness from the property owners. So it's a sophisticated conversation. And I think that's, our ratio of public lands to non-federal lands is very, discrepant in terms of what are we, 80%, 85% approximately, federal lands. I'm rounding up. It's maybe more like 80%. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I think it's the point about the community conversations in kind of planning 101 is that's critical. Identifying what the community is interested in, where there's opportunities, finding coalitions, finding partnerships, having that robust dialogue, which can then lead to opportunities that maybe aren't there before. But some of the structural challenges that we've been experiencing collectively is just some of that is our land base, or ownership base, which makes it the system requires property owner consent. And the last time we had that kind of rigor was decades ago. Not that it can't happen again, but it's been elevated by the legislature to ensure that that's occurring.
I think the outreach suggestion that Lori had, I mean, once those reports come through from the BOCC, would that potentially be a time for us to make those connections? And then if that actually evolves into any sort of communication with our commission, I mean, it sounds like it's more of getting that involvement, and like what Mark was saying is like it is a community effort of some type. It's like, do we start with that, see what sort of feedback we get as far as what the tribe would want to see, perhaps, and then go from there. I mean, I could see this being something that's prolonged by several years, just but I mean, at least it's on our wish list of sorts. Right?
So Rachel, are you saying that we would wait until the updates for goal 5?
Well, kind of from Mark's suggestion, as far before doing any sort of outreach.
But in the meantime, could we send them our agenda? Let them just start to know who we are
Or do some,
and not say anything. Just
I mean,
send them.
you could do some really informal reconnaissance yourselves.
Or just make them
Take a visit to
aware.
Warm Springs and say, hey, is
But
there
just-
anyone who knows about?
But just make them aware of what the commission does. And like I said, it's always very interesting information that comes with the agendas. That's what I'm thinking, because if you said that was going to take 8 months or longer. We're on the commission for 4 years. Let's not waste a quarter. let's just send them the agenda.
Just.
If I could,
You could begin to build relations.
Yeah,
You could begin to learn,
yeah.
and you're tracking, monitoring, and participating in the state level so that you don't miss a beat as.
Yeah, that's a long time to wait.
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely suggest we should start with our own education. I think a field trip would be good, but I think, we're a new commission. We're all, for the most part, we're all starting largely from a similar place. And I think it would be good for us to start from a similar basis of information. So I think letting them know we're here, but also letting them know that, hey, we have an intent to work with you when the time is right, and that we are seeking to educate ourselves in the meanwhile would be kind of a good message to put forward.
Agreed.
Is he putting together the field trip?
And I mean,
Was that him volunteering?
It was.
Okay, I wasn't clear.
it also recognizes
I can reach
Um,
out.
it also recognizes so the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, the ceded territory is massive.
Yeah.
And they do their best to keep track of potential impacts to resources and things that are happening in those areas. But they don't have the capacity to really track in detail everything. So the more you can say, hey, we're contacting you because we have an intent to work on preservation of areas of the county that are important to you, signals to them, we're going to do something useful, and so it's worth spending a little time with us. And I think that's a really good good way to approach it, because otherwise they now that we're sending them all these land use applications, I mean, their ability to just kind of keep on top of things is they have limited capacity. So make it clear that this is going to be worth your while to engage with us.
I wanted to make a suggestion. Perhaps I'm legal counsel, but I've really enjoyed ooh, this is loud. I really enjoyed the conversation so far this evening. And I think that, kind of depending on, what the definition of landmark is, if it's not just a building, if it's a site or sites, I might suggest that coordinating with other adjoining counties like Crook and Jefferson and Klamath, because, when we're talking about indigenous resources, we didn't just have it, right here in Deschutes County, and then the other jurisdictional stuff that Peter was touching on, what we're talking about, what might be within our bailiwick, is limited compared to the amount of federal land. But, maybe to get a more complete picture of some of these resources, some coordination with adjoining counties might be something, and adjoining and then adjoining to that, Wasco, I don't know. But it might be very interesting.
Yes, it would be.
What that's worth.
That kind of leads to an area that is of personal interest, and that would be generating more visibility and education about our historic resources and the history of this area, region wide. And I think you'd probably have to hunt through a variety of websites all over the place to really find out, kind of, other than maybe there might be a few texts or books out that might help you. How many people have read those? I couldn't say, probably not very many. But maybe there's an opportunity for us to do a little more on the public relations side and the education side, whether it's with young people or visitors coming to town or people who have lived here. I mean, we have a lot of resources from people who have lived here their whole lives, who are still living. And so,
Like
Pinky
me.
Christopher.
right. So maybe there's a piece that kind of wraps around this as well. That's public relations, marketing, whatever you want to call it, education. And I'm not quite sure I really want to get into a lot of detail about it, but it seems like it's important. We're here as a service to the citizens of Deschutes County. That's ultimately who we serve. We should be trying to educate them about what it is, not only what we do, but what they're living, what amongst, and what this history is here that they live in. So,
Was it in I can't remember what document it was in. I think you shared, I know you shared with me, Tanya. It's the long list of all the recognized,
The goal 5 one.
yeah,
That's in our strategic plan.
Yes.
Kind of all of the stuff.
Yes.
We like to-
so
Another website.
as I was reading all of that, I thought, how ignorant am I? I mean, I was amazed at how many things I did not know and sites I did not know. I went through and marked
Yeah.
and I drew a line and said,
me too. Go see these.
first these, then there's tier 2.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that is I think that's great. I mean, along with educating and making it aware, like for us too,
Mhm,
so that we can be conversant.
mhm.
Because there were so many of those sites, I was amazed and thought, I know nothing about this, but I asked Pinky and he knew a bunch.
Mhm.
My father-in-law's lived here his whole life and
He's
he's
90
90.
years old.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's
And he
great.
used to rodeo and his name's Pinky.
He's
And
famous.
yes, well, he's not famous, but he's quasi famous.
Locally.
Yeah,
Anybody named Pinky is famous.
right?
Add that to, sorry, Mike, please. That goal 5 list, there's on the HLC website, which admittedly is fairly bare bones. There is a story map that has it sort of those sites placed down in a map so you can zoom in and zoom out. And it's essentially the same information that is captured in the original goal 5 kind of application. So it's not a ton of detail because that's just all that was supplied to us, but it is, sorry.
At least there's some pictures.
Yeah, there's pictures and sometimes there's kind of funky little stuff depending on what the site is, but it's on this map and you can zoom in and see, and it's that's a fun resource if you haven't seen that.
No, I haven't. And I think that might be something we start to look at where you said there's limited information. That's something that seems to me like low hanging fruit to start to work that list and expand on that. I mean, that's easy because then people can get to it from the internet and there would be expanded information about all of those sites. So that might be something we could concentrate on. At least that's within our control. It's within our control to do the research and then get it approved by whomever to add to the website.
Yeah, and a shout out to Emmy from Sisters. They did a fabulous job kind of zhuzhing up their RLS website and making a really nice story map. They got a consultant to do it. This was through the CLG grant last year, and they did a great job. And it's really cool. It's just very dynamic. There's different types of maps and overlays. You can do it by decade, by theme, and it's that could be a future CLG to just refresh our. The list is static right now. There's only so much information that's there, but to make it more accessible and
The
yeah.
base.
Yeah, exactly.
The bones of it is there. It's
Yeah.
just elaborate.
I feel more excited about that because it seems like something we could do in our 4-year terms.
Mhm.
We could actually, I mean, I'm not sure about the native peoples, but we could do this and we may not be able to do all of it, but we could do some of it. And that goes with that education and visibility. I like that a lot.
Sounds good.
I thought that was a great idea.
I was just a little bit curious, since we have the commissioners here with us today. I feel like I'm in a bad speaker spot. If you guys had any things that you wanted to suggest for us to kind of look at, obviously you heard some feedback when you were gonna potentially disband. But if there was any, I don't know, education, outreach, any ideas that came forward, I feel like it'd be really nice if we could contribute some time and maybe do something social media wise. Sorry, this is awful. But just any suggestions that you guys had for.
Well, my personal love is old barns. And I don't know if you have to have the permission of the person taking the picture, but so Deschutes County's only been around, what, a little over 100 years now, but there's some amazing old barns. And I know we did have a legislative bill that if you had your house built, I think, what was it, before 1945, you could had an ADU if you had that old of a house. But then we hardly had any of those, didn't we, Tanya? I mean, very few. So we mailed out 80 letters or something ridiculous. But honestly, I love old barns, and I think to save them, it's I see them, pictures all the time of people taking these old barns all over the state. But it would be really sweet if we had the ones from, Deschutes County. Just, something.
I
a little
love that
different.
idea.
Well, it's just really simple, but, they do disintegrate it. So what? So we gotta take their picture now while they're still standing. So Lily, I don't know.
No, I like that. It's fun. It's something that could
Can you
be
take a picture of
simple.
somebody's barn without their permission?
I feel like they would give us their permission. Um,
I'm talking about old barns, like, ones with character.
Yeah, something like that would be a good appreciation that people might enjoy to see on some sort of presentation front and get people excited about it. I like that.
I mean, even if we had something similar to that as a topic for, or some sort of presentation for Preservation Month in May. If we could pull something
May?
together in time.
Yeah, I know. Everybody go around and take a picture and then you
Yeah.
can see how many of you took the same one.
Right. Yeah.
He has one on his land.
Okay, perfect. That's what we
We call it
want.
the hop house.
Okay.
The
I just
hop
texted my
house?
brother-in-law to see if they know Pinky.
You did?
Of course I did.
Yeah, I'm trying, I know I've got pictures.
That just reminded me, the email from
Yes.
Kelly Cannon Miller about Preservation Month and topics, and I know that sounds like we're probably gonna be doing some sort of outreach between our new members on the commission and stuff to get things going, but I mean, just as topics for the month, I mean, I think of Central Oregon barn tour would be awesome.
Or-
Even if it was just a presentation, not necessarily a physical visit.
How about if we used social media to solicit pictures and information of old barns in Deschutes County? Then we don't have to find them. They'll find us. And that we could maybe do. We could do that in March and April for May and say, here's what we've had. How about?
Yeah,
that?
or it might even be fun to do something with Ben Source. Do a little bit of celebration with them and have them see if they'd be willing to handle kind of a nominate your favorite historic spot kind of process to
fun.
get community conversation going.
Fun.
Boy, can I-
That's what people going.
Sounds like fun.
It's more involvement with.
The community. So
Yeah.
they actually, when you drive down the road, you actually see the most amazing things. Like, I know we have a cemetery site with someone who died from the Spanish flu down on Vanderbilt. That was one of the historical facts I remember.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
bad.
I know, but you have to remember my life.
No more flu.
Anyway, it's only one.
Looking through some of the past minutes, I noticed that there were collaborative meetings occasionally with the other commissions in the region. Maybe sort of a mini conference or something. Does that resonate at all? Kind of getting on the same page with like the,
Right.
Landmarks Commission from Bend and Redmond and
Yeah,
whatever other societies there are.
I'd like that.
Maybe some guest speakers. I don't know, just
Why not?
trying to
Yeah.
raise the awareness.
Regular check-ins with the other commissions,
Yeah.
at least Redmond and.
Yeah, we used to, as part of each meeting, just get quick updates from Bend and Redmond. Most of them were fairly quiet. Redmond, as I think I noted before, did some really interesting events. They're a great group. I think they did it at the church that is now the Grace and Hammer Pizza, and they had a whole thing where people who got married there back in the day could like submit their photos and get free pizza or something. Bend does a lot of just review of things. Like they have a lot of actual kind of nuts and bolts review of things, and they report back to us. But they're pretty busy in a different way. So I think we certainly have the inroads to make those communications and have some sort of joint meeting if we wanted to in the future.
One of the suggestions I would make to the Landmarks Commission is just to manage everyone's expectations. We have a work plan that that is drafted. It's going to get released in the next couple of weeks for public comment. Our planning commission, our historic landmarks commission, ultimately the board of county commissioners will set the priorities for much of the community development department is kind of in a line, and they, if you're a building inspector, that's what you're going to be doing. But long range planning has a certain amount of flexibility. And I think I'm not expecting this conversation to get into these details, but for our landmarks commissioners to think about what your own expectations are, how they align with our current set of resources. We rely on certified local government grants. Those are 18-month grants. They fund the commission for quarterly meetings and staff resources for essentially to serve those quarterly meetings and or manage and administer certain grants. To the extent that there are other ideas and efforts and opportunities, this work plan is the opportunity to express and identify those so that ultimately the 3 county commissioners can weigh those considerations with others from the public that we have projects that are multi-year that span just 1 year. Sometimes they get into 18 months to 2 years. So the importance of the work plan in this context is it allows our advisory bodies and the public to identify opportunities and the board to set the work plan. And as resources become available over the course of a 12-month period, we often come back and ask the board for direction. So I think that's just going to be really important because ultimately we, as I look to my staff, one in particular who is managing many different responsibilities, which includes the Landmarks Commission as the staff liaison, it's managing those expectations so that both the Landmarks Commission and the board are ultimately the board is in alignment with what we should be doing. And we want to ensure that we're maximizing Landmark Commission opportunities with the resources that we have or the resources that the board wants to direct to us. So this conversation will be your first meeting in May to revisit that work plan. So you have a few months to explore on your own and talk amongst yourselves. Be careful. We have legal counsel here. If you meet more than 3 or 4 of you, that's a quorum. That's a public meeting. So just a fresh reminder there. But anyway, it's a real opportunity. The timing of this meeting, the timing of the appointments by the board, the timing of this joint meeting, and with our forthcoming work plan are outstanding to have the Landmarks Commission express their voice and for the board with public input, of course, to set the directives for this department, specifically as it pertains to the planning division and long range planners.
I would just offer one of the exciting pieces with historic preservation, unlike maybe some of the other commissions and whatnot that we have with the county, is that we also have the historical museum. And so there could be ideas that as you're thinking about this, it could be to collaborate with the historical museum on various initiatives, projects. Some of those that I heard tonight, might be applicable for joint efforts, or something that we can work with them. And of course, if we put too much on their plate, then I'm going to hear about it because my father-in-law is the immediate past president.
There we go.
But that's okay. There are opportunities. Kelly Cannon Miller, of course, the executive director, was a very strong proponent this last fall, and so I would really utilize her and her resources for some of your great work as well.
And she will be reaching out to, if she hasn't already. She does a lot of the, as Chair Stemich was just noting, that she does, Kelly Cannon Miller from the Deschutes Historical Society and Museum does a lot of the May Historic Preservation Month stuff. So she's going to be, I sent her your email addresses. In this case, it was allowed, but she will be reaching out to everyone. She kind of throws out a call for just all bodies and help and brains and whether it's carrying things or coming up with ideas. So you'll be hearing from her soon, because that's a really great collaboration, because she wants all hands on deck for that.
Yeah, I was gonna, back when the Historic Preservation Month first came up, and there was some brainstorming about things that the HLC could do. I was going to say, you should also figure out what the historical society is doing so that you can either be, complementary or, have some synergy or, at least coordination.
I don't think we could do it without them, in fact.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have that.
Yeah, even as I was, Patty's suggestion about the barn tour is like, that would be eventually, if we, did do something like that, that would be a research item that I think the museum could probably take on, because they have a good inventory and documentation of a lot of those buildings. So that, yeah, I think that could be something. Typically when, speaking of Preservation Month, we'll start with some sort of like brainstorming kickoff meeting, just to get ideas out there. So it's, it's not just our commissions, it's not just the museum, but there's a lot of other related groups. The library is often involved, the Tower Theater, the Desert Museum has been involved before, and Forest Service. So there's been, different entities over the years come and gone. Some that are, every year have some sort of contribution for Preservation Month, but yeah, usually it's a museum that's kind of handling everything, but as long as as either events that were already planned for May or ones that are created specifically for Preservation Month, we try to at least, have a conglomerate of events, during just that month. So, but yeah, Kelly's definitely a good ringleader for all of that. When Mark was mentioning tours of historic sites that we have on our inventory, as I'm like looking back on, over a decade on the commission, that's like the majority, I feel, of those sites that are listed, I have now visited because of two reasons. Because we have done tours, and it was usually ones that were coordinated with the, either the county staff or one of the commissioners in particular that was pretty good at organizing those. And then the other one was being events that we had during Preservation Month. So I think in a lot of ways that's my familiarity with a lot of them, only because of the own outreach that we did ourselves. So yeah, and we honestly, we haven't done any of those tours, thanks to the pandemic that kind of put a damper on that. But yeah,
We're back. We're back.
So yeah, it would be a lot of fun to do some more tours, and to get to know the commissioners too.
And that won't cost any money. Because we would all like volunteer our own time and automobiles. Yeah, so there was a lot of good ideas that I'm thinking, these are not expensive. We can do some of these. The survey's kind of expensive, but we can't do anything with that yet anyway.
So back when mothballing the commission was on the table, there was a project that hadn't been started yet that the HLC had funding for from the state. Am I yes.
Oh, that's happening. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Chang. That's sorry. That's underway. That's in the City of Sisters. And so they're kind of on their own track. They're with Emmy's direction. They are, I'm not quite sure where they are in the process. And Emmy, if you feel like jumping in to let us know where you are, that's great. Oh, there you are. But yeah, that is their task. That is part of this cycle of CLG grant that still alive and kicking. And that grant cycle ends in August. So Emmy, do you want to give us a little update if you don't mind?
Sure, I'm happy to give an update. So we had a project slated when we were granted the CLG grant funds, And when HLC was being contemplated for disbandment, we kind of put that project on hold. But as soon as we knew that the HLC was going to proceed with recruitment and going forward, we picked back up this project and tried to catch up with our timeline. So what we're trying to do is we're working on a contract with a local architect and sisters to prepare some guidelines and recommendations of fire resilient building materials that would comply with the Western design theme that we have that makes Sisters very special. As part of the reconnaissance level survey that was done in Sisters in 2018, we do have some historically, architecturally significant and eligible buildings for historic registration and designation. But one of the things that the RLS identified was, one, the Western design theme could use some revamping with the code language just to kind of keep it fresh. And the other recommendation with our Western design theme is with the building hardening trends that we're seeing with building code across the state of Oregon, we wanted to adopt, or not adopt, but kind of outline these fire resilient building materials that will help retain our Western design theme, because in the future, even though right now the Western design theme, the buildings themselves aren't historically eligible for designation, but they very well soon could be over a few decades, because the district itself is historic in the sense that the event in 1970, when we designated the Western design theme, that would be historic, eligible for historic designation as a district as a whole. So taking these efforts now to outline these guidelines and recommendations helps to ensure that we preserve the historic potential of our downtown Sisters.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Oh, what is the saloon? I'm just wondering. The saloon, isn't it pretty ancient? In Sisters? I mean, it's same.
Pre-1920.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah.
That seems right.
Teens.
Yeah.
Is it- okay.
Yeah.
Did you ask if Sisters is ancient?
No, I think they were asking, sorry, the mics are funky in here, about the saloon. The age
Yes.
of the saloon and Sisters, is that?
We do have some great historic buildings from 1912. That was a big era in Sisters. So Sisters Saloon, the Sisters Administration Building. I think those are both nationally registered. If not, the Sisters Saloon would be a local registered building. And then we have a few others from that era.
I just wanted to offer just recognition to Emmy and her staff for the leadership that they've exhibited over the last several years. Certainly Landmarks Commissioner Dennis Smidling is representative of that area. It's worth just re-emphasizing as you think about Barnes and you think about these landmarks on private property. You're just faced with a lot of logistical challenges. Access, permission, liability. One of the reasons why the cities of Bend and Redmond are so successful, they have, of course, a significant inventory of landmarks, but they're accessible from the right of way. You can walk by them, you can look into them. Some of them are open for customers, and as this Landmarks Commission, is brainstorming and thinking about opportunities, we have respectfully, and the City of Sisters staff has embraced these opportunities to tell their story, to understand what's in their backyard, to revisit the Western themes. And I think a large part of that is because that's what you have in vibrant cities. You have the ability to use the public right of way, to walk historic districts, to see historic businesses. It's not to diminish what we have here, which, as Commissioner Chang and others have noted, that the utility and the value in the county as it's stitched together with other counties, the regional discourse, the regional narrative of what these lands represented for settlement for the indigenous tribes that utilize the land and had a connection to the lands very differently. But the cities bring a rich story of themselves, and so much of that is the accessibility, ghost tours, walking tours. It's hard to do that in the county. So again, not to diminish what we have in our backyard, but as you're thinking about how to maximize those investments, the City of Sisters has some tremendous opportunities. And again, a credit goes to Emmy and her colleagues in the Community Development Department and for City Council for supporting those efforts, because it is a vibrant community with a rich history.
I grew up in a house that was built in like 1880. I mean, like, oh my gosh, it's like so much older than all this other we're talking about. And then we had to stay one time in the summer in something that was even older without electricity they were doing the wheat harvest. And my mother thought that myself and my 5 sisters should go up there and be on with a windmill to get the water. Oh, it was really a great time. So I really appreciate modern conveniences.
Peter's point is really well taken, and in my view,
Darn it.
there are National Register properties in Sisters that are not easily accessible to the public, as Peter stated. But I also know, having been in conversation with some of those landowners, they really somehow want people to know that they have this asset. They just don't want to open their front gate to the public and do tours on Tuesday. And there might be some really interesting, as Eli stated, public relations opportunities to give the property owners voice, and have them make it possible for them to contribute to the overall history of the place. So it is an interesting challenge, and I think it's one that the commission can rise to supporting.
Is the county still issuing outreach letters to the historic resources ownerships? It's been a few years. I think since anything like that was distributed. Does that ring a bell?
I'm looking at
We were going
it's
to
Tanya.
probably do it
Yeah.
this year, so that's actually something we can talk about at every meeting. Just we were speaking of maybe doing well, I don't know what shape it would take, but perhaps it would be outreach to people who already have these properties to be like, hey, remember you're this is a great thing you have, and just be aware. I don't know, but that's not necessarily going to promote additional ones. There's different nuances or different cuts that we could take, but that was definitely in the hopper for potentially doing this year. But we haven't done it in a while.
Right. If anything, it's sort of a reminder to that ownership that county still acknowledges that is a property.
Thank you.
And, yeah. I mean,
Black olives and sauteed mushrooms.
Well, they were eating pizza.
Well, if there's that then.
So, yeah, I think if we're continuing to do outreach like that, at least, I mean, even if they can't open their doors to their private homes or businesses or whatever, at least, we do recognize as a commission of the important historic value. Kind of had a really good stream of consciousness there, kind of talking from thing to thing. Yeah. Any other items of comment topics? for any, I guess if we were to segue in the next action item had to do with, any coordination issues is how it's worded on our agenda itself, but I guess,
I apologize. I have to leave early.
okay.
I live in Three Rivers and we're buried in snow. And so I just hate to continue. So I thought I can, aren't we? I really, well, how close are we? Like, are we gonna be done by 7?
I don't know, but I have to drive home too, and I really am dreading it, so.
Yeah. But I just have to say, I mean, I'm brand new, I know nothing. But I have really enjoyed this conversation, but I've really enjoyed hearing too that the commissioners support this. And what I'm hearing from you is we're pro-history.
Yeah.
And I think that's critically important to hear as a brand new volunteer. I mean, I want to make a difference. I want to do worthwhile work. And that's what every volunteer wants. And we're going to be unable to do that if we don't have your support. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would add to that, kind of getting into this other Board Historic Landmarks Commission coordination issues is let us know what we can do to help.
We will.
Thank you.
We totally will.
Yeah.
So often there are a lot of advisory boards or committees that touch the Board of Commissioners, and I really appreciate hearing from them. We need you to do this specific thing, and here's why. Folks who spend a lot of time thinking about a specific topic, they have a much better idea of what needs to be done than I do.
Yeah.
So help us help you.
And what a fun committee this is. I mean, who are we going to run into that says, no, that no more history? That's just not going to happen because we're all proud of the history that we live amongst.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so lucky you that you have us.
Well, I know you two are busy, as is Tony DeBone. Hopefully we can meet more often than every 8 years.
I think that would be great.
Yeah, I do. However, once every 2 years.
No, because
Yeah.
it is, I did get my degree in history. And
Yes.
so it's like.
I loved hearing that.
I know, so I do think it's important and you do repeat it if you don't know what it is, so, and it's not all we want to repeat. So I think this group is really, there's some really incredibly golden opportunities up for you guys. So you do have our support. I really felt really badly when we talked about, we were having a hard time, we were struggling and now we have a whole new life to it, so it's great.
Okay. And I do think we have great resources with the staff. I've met, and we've heard from all the staff members and
county legal.
yeah, right.
Don't forget me.
Especially county legal.
Don't forget her.
Uh-huh.
I'm just not about the bad
Just in
news.
case.
News too.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
So are we done?
I think we actually, unless there's any others or items that you want to.
I was just going to briefly speak logistics, just so the next HLC meeting is the first Monday in May, and I forget the exact date of that, but and at that time, thanks, legal counsel. We'll be discussing the work plan. So as all those things that Peter noted about kind of where the HLC fits in the larger community development picture. May 6th. Thank you. And we'll be continuing to work on these CLG grant tasks that have already been kind of birthed before this commission reconvened. And this will give a good opportunity to start thinking about the next cycle. And this is where kind of the rubber hits the road and we have time to think about that. And that'll be good opportunities for instance, the website stuff or things like that could be potentially actually funded by the CLG grant. So I think this is all kind of cascading in a nice way, but that's just our next meeting. So.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Right. Welcome.
Thanks
For joining us.
Yeah, no, that's good information, Tanya. That was actually one of the questions I was gonna ask is if that next CLG cycle is starting August or is that?
No, this one closes. We have to close it out by the end of August. So I do all the reporting. So for instance, Emmy's sister's project will complete prior to that, and we'll, close it all out. And I believe the next round of applications is the following February. Or usually is. So, and usually we end up scrambling a little bit. So if we can start thinking about it, now or soon, I think that gives us a chance to vet stuff, and get a little more in depth. And, I think it's a good opportunity. It sounds really far away, but it's really not.
No.
Yeah. And then again, just to reiterate, you all should get communication about May Preservation Month from Kelly Cannon Miller. So that'll be lots of opportunities. So.
Can we get full communication information with each fellow commissioner? I
think so. Yeah, I can, I'll figure out a way to share that information. Again, you don't want to reply. Oh, you don't want to get groups of people and then it's an accidental public meeting and I'll sick Stephanie on you. But yes, absolutely.
Yes.
We can.
Don't say, hey, let's meet at Starbucks and get going on some ideas. So yes.
Two's okay, right?
Two is okay. Yes, yes.
How many are there total right now? 5?
5, 6.
5 plus 2 ex officio,
Okay.
which counts towards the.
We have-
Yeah, it does count.
Have a full commission like this and probably.
Oh, no, it's who
years.
can conduct business.
Wow.
Well, ex officio can't vote.
They can vote.
They cannot. Vote.
Oh, they cannot vote.
The ex officio.
So I would say that it's
So you could have
3.
two appointed plus an ex officio all together, and that's
Yeah.
still okay.
yeah. But let's not push it.
That's what you call subcommittee work, right?
No, Phil.
I mean, it's hard to get stuff done without subcommittees, right?
Yes, I agree. True.
Committee of 2. That's right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your time tonight, and Commissioners Chang and Adair. It was really good to have a little conversation with you for the first time in a very long time. So, unless we have any other topics, I think we could close out tonight's meeting. So, all right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.